Please, can we stay here just for tonight? The voice was small, trembling. Two girls no older than 8 stood under the weak glow of the porch light. Rainwater dripped from their braids onto the cracked doorstep. Eli froze, still wearing his grease-stained mechanic uniform, a wrench in one hand and exhaustion in his eyes. He glanced past them. No car, no adults. Just darkness and the sound of thunder rolling down the street. One of the twins clutched the other's sleeve. We lost our way, Eli swallowed hard. Where are your parents? Silence. Only the rain answered. He sighed, stepped aside, and said quietly, "Come in before you catch your death." Inside, the apartment was small but warm. A single bulb flickered above the kitchen table. The smell of engine oil lingered in the air. The girls stared around, wide-eyed, at the peeling paint and the stack of unpaid bills by the sink. Eli handed them his own blanket and reheated the leftover soup from his dinner. They ate like they hadn't eaten in days, polite, careful, whispering thank yous between bites. He noticed their coats, expensive fabric, fine stitching, little gold initials on the buttons. "They didn't belong here. You live nearby?" he asked. They exchanged a glance. The older twin bit her lip. "Daddy said never to talk to strangers." Eli nodded. "Good advice," he smiled faintly. "But tonight, I guess I'm just the man with soup." As they settled on the couch, the younger one clutched a small silver locket. When the flickering light caught it, he saw an engraving, CK. He almost asked about it, but her eyes were already closing. The night stretched quiet. Eli sat by the window, watching the rain smear the city lights into soft colors. For a moment, he forgot his own troubles, unpaid rent, extra shifts, the loneliness that echoed louder than the thunder. The girls slept peacefully. He whispered to himself, "Just one night." Hours later, a noise outside jolted him awake, headlights sweeping across the curtains. Black SUVs crawled through the street like silent beasts searching for prey. Men with flashlights shouted names he couldn't hear. Eli's heart thudded. He peeked outside, shiny shoes, earpieces, luxury cars. Definitely not neighborhood police. He turned back toward the couch. The girls were still asleep, unaware of the chaos outside. He quietly locked the door, unsure if he was protecting them or himself. Morning came gray and slow. The rain had stopped, but the unease hadn't. As the girls ate toast, Eli's old phone buzzed on the table. The cracked screen flashed a news alert. Billionaire Calvin Kane offers massive reward for missing twin daughters. Eli's breath caught. His eyes darted to the locket. CK, he looked at the girls, innocent, quiet, smiling softly at him. His spoon clattered against the plate. "No," he whispered. Outside, an engine roared closer. He stood, heart pounding. Whatever peace last night brought, it was over. "Those are his daughters?" Eli's neighbor whispered, staring wide-eyed at the glowing screen of her phone. Eli didn't answer. He was too busy watching the twins, sitting at his small kitchen table, laughing softly as they shared the last of the bread and jam. Morning light spilled through the dusty window, catching the golden locket that hung between them. He couldn't stop looking at it now. Those 2 letters, CK, shining like trouble. The news headline replayed in his head. Billionaire Calvin Kane offers reward for missing twin daughters. Reward, $10,000. Enough to clear his debts, fix the roof, maybe give his son a real chance at college. He reached for his old phone, thumb hovering over the number in the ad. But when he looked back at the girls, one humming, one swinging her legs, happy for the first time, he froze. They had no idea how loud their father's name was out there. No idea what kind of world waited behind that headline. He set the phone down. "Eat slow," he said gently. No rush. A car horn blared outside. Then another. Eli's gut clenched. Through the thin curtains, black SUVs lined the street. Men in dark suits spilled out, talking into earpieces. The neighbors came pouring out of their doors, pointing, whispering. Someone shouted, "Over here." "That's the place." Before Eli could move, the first knock hit his door. Hard, official, final. When he opened it, the world's richest man stood on his porch. Calvin Kane, tailored suit, diamond watch, hair slicked like glass, cameras flashing behind him. He didn't even wait for Eli to speak. His eyes swept the small apartment like a man checking a stain. "My daughters were here?" The words weren't gratitude. They were disbelief. Eli nodded slowly. They came to me last night. I didn't. Calvin brushed past him, kneeling to the twins. They flung their arms around him, crying in relief. He hugged them, but his eyes never left Eli's broken floor or peeling paint. Reporters shouted questions from the street. Calvin turned back, voice smooth and cold. You did what anyone should do. Thank you. He handed one of his men a card. Make sure he's compensated. Eli shook his head. I don't want money. Calvin's smile tightened. Of course you do. Everyone wants something. The neighbors watched, some in awe, some smirking. One muttered loud enough for all to hear. Looks like he's in trouble now. A reporter stepped forward, microphone trembling. Mr. Moran, did you try to ransom them? The police said. Eli's jaw clenched. No, just that, one word. Calm, steady, but silence can be louder than shouting. The crowd felt it. The cameras caught it. Calvin didn't like it. He adjusted his cufflinks, eyes sharp. Next time, Mr. Moran, don't keep what isn't yours. The words landed like a slap. Eli said nothing, just met his gaze. Poor man to rich man, and didn't blink. For a moment, Calvin's smirk faltered. Then he turned away, ushering the twins toward the car. They looked back, both at once, eyes wet and confused. Thank you, Uncle Eli, one whispered as a guard closed the door. Engines started. The street filled with exhaust and camera flashes. Calvin paused by the car door, then turned, voice raised, performative, meant for the crowd. Mr. Moran, he called out. You're invited to my charity gala this weekend. A public thank you for your kindness. His grin was polished steel. The neighbors gasped. Cameras clicked. Eli stood there, still, hands in his pockets. Sure, he said quietly, if I'm not working. Calvin's laughter echoed as the convoy pulled away. The sound faded down the street, leaving only the hum of gossip and the bitter taste of humiliation hanging in the air. Eli closed his door slowly, the latch clicking like the end of a chapter, though deep down, he knew this story had only just begun. A mechanic at a millionaire's gala? What could go wrong? The words came from Tony, Eli's co-worker, laughing so hard he nearly dropped the wrench. The others joined in, grease-streaked faces grinning under the flickering workshop light. Eli just looked at the ornate envelope in his hands. Thick cream paper, gold edges, his name written in elegant calligraphy. Mr. Eli Moran, guest of honor, man. They'll eat you alive in there, someone said. Don't even got a suit. Eli smiled faintly. Guess I'll just wear my best oil stains. They laughed again, but as their laughter faded, the weight of the letter sank in. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a stage. And Calvin Kane was setting it. That night, Eli sat at his kitchen table, staring at the letter again. The twins' laughter still echoed faintly in his mind, the way they'd called him Uncle Eli. The reward money Calvin had offered could have fixed everything. The overdue bills, his son's tuition, even the broken roof that leaked every time it rained, but his pride wouldn't let him ask. Not after that public humiliation, not from that man. He unfolded the invitation one more time. The words seemed to challenge him directly. A night of gratitude and goodwill. Gratitude, right. He exhaled slowly. Fine, he muttered. If he wants a show, I'll give him one. The day of the gala arrived. Eli stood before his cracked mirror, trying to tame his hair. He cleaned his old black jacket until it almost shined. Borrowed a pair of shoes from a neighbor. A size too small, but they'd do. Practiced a few polite greetings under his breath. Thank you for the invitation. Nice to meet you. Each line felt foreign in his mouth. As evening fell, the cab stopped before a mansion that looked like a palace. Marble pillars stretched toward the sky. Valets in suits opened car doors for guests, dripping in diamonds and silk. Eli stepped out, immediately feeling the weight of every eye on him. He could almost hear their thoughts. That's him? The mechanic? Inside, the air sparkled with laughter and champagne. Music swelled softly under the chatter of polished voices. The chandeliers above scattered light like stars. A waiter hesitated before handing him a glass. Sir, champagne?" Eli smiled. "Water's fine." As he walked deeper into the ballroom, the whispers began. "That's the guy who sheltered the twins." "Really?" "In a garage. I heard he tried to sell them." No, the billionaire invited him himself." Each sentence brushed past him like a breeze carrying dust. He kept his head high, eyes calm. Then the room shifted. Calvin Kane appeared at the top of the grand staircase, surrounded by reporters and flashing cameras. Impeccable as ever, crisp tuxedo, diamond cufflinks catching the light. "Ah, our hero has arrived." Calvin's voice boomed across the hall. Guests turned, applauding politely. Calvin descended the stairs, every movement rehearsed, every smile calculated. He took Eli's hand in a firm shake, holding it a moment too long. "Let's give a toast to Mr. Moran," he said loudly. "The man who protected my daughters when I couldn't." Applause, flashbulbs, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Eli nodded once. "Glad they're safe." "That's what matters." Calvin's grin tightened. "Humble and brave." "What a combination." The crowd laughed, too loudly. Eli felt the sting, but he didn't react. Just kept that quiet look of patience that made Calvin's charm falter for a heartbeat. Music resumed, chatter filling the space. Calvin drifted off to mingle with his guests, his arm around one of his daughters. The other, a teenage girl with sharp eyes, lingered nearby. She stared at Eli curiously, as if trying to figure him out. Then, as he bent to thank a waiter, her voice carried across the circle of guests. "Daddy says you only helped us for the reward." The words dropped like a glass shattering. The laughter froze. Then it returned, sharper, meaner this time. Calvin's face twitched, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. The damage was done. Eli straightened slowly. The lights caught the edge of his worn jacket. His voice, when it came, was steady, calm, too calm. "Believe what you want," he said softly. Then he turned away from the laughter, leaving a silence behind him that no champagne could fill. Calvin chuckled, twirling a glossy white chess piece between his fingers. "Care to play, Mr. Mechanic?" he said, voice carrying across the glittering ballroom. "Let's see if kindness makes you smart." The laughter came instantly, bright, cruel, echoing off the marble. Guests leaned in, eyes sparkling with anticipation. A waiter cleared a space on the long glass table. In seconds, a polished wooden chessboard appeared, each piece gleaming under the chandelier. Eli stood still, hands in his pockets, the faintest sigh escaping his lips. "I don't think," he began. "If you're scared," Calvin interrupted smoothly, setting the king down with a soft click. "Just say so." The crowd oohed, loving the drama. Champagne glasses tilted toward the scene like spotlights. From a quiet corner, a woman's voice cut through the noise. "Always a show with you, Calvin." It was Dr. Marin Holt, the philanthropist and economist who funded half the city's charities. Unlike the others, she didn't laugh. Her gaze shifted between Calvin's smug grin and Eli's calm expression, something sharp flickering behind her eyes. Calvin ignored her. "Come on, Mr. Moran, it's just a game. Unless fixing engines is more your speed." Eli met his stare. For a long, quiet second, the room stilled, laughter fading, curiosity rising. Then Eli pulled out a chair. "A game's a game," he said simply. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone whispered, "He's actually going to do it." Calvin grinned wide. "Good. Let's make this interesting." He gestured for a servant to bring more light. The board glowed, black and white squares reflecting the chandelier's shimmer. Calvin took white. "Pawn to e4, he announced loudly, pushing the piece forward with a flourish. He glanced around for reaction, basking in attention. Eli nodded once, eyes scanning the board. His fingers moved lightly, calm, precise. "Pawn to c5. The whisper traveled through the room like a breeze. "Sicilian defense," someone murmured. "He knows the Sicilian?" Calvin's grin faltered for half a second before he forced a laugh. "Oh, he's read a few manuals. Cute." He slammed his next move down, knight to f3. Aggressive, confident, Eli's hand glided forward, d6. His movements were quiet but deliberate, like a craftsman at work. Calvin leaned back, crossing his legs. "I'll warn you, Mr. Moran, I don't go easy on charity cases." Eli didn't look up. "Didn't ask you to." That answer made a few guests exchange glances. Dr. Holt's eyebrow lifted slightly. The rhythm of the match quickened. Calvin's moves were loud, flashy, every piece landing with a clap that demanded attention. Eli's, in contrast, were silent, steady, precise. As the board filled, so did the tension. The crowd that had laughed minutes ago now leaned forward, whispering softly. Each of Eli's replies came faster, cleaner, cutting through Calvin's overconfident opening. At one point, Calvin lunged with a pawn, a reckless push meant to intimidate. Eli's rook slid across the board, pinning a knight in a subtle trap. A murmur spread. "Wait, he planned that," someone said. Calvin's smirk twitched. He forced a laugh again, louder this time to drown out his unease. "Beginner's luck." Eli's gaze never lifted. "Maybe," he said quietly. From her table, Dr. Holt leaned forward. Her expression had changed, no longer distant curiosity, but recognition. She watched Eli's composure, the way his hand hovered over each piece, precise and patient. It wasn't luck, it was memory. Calvin made another move, bishop to c4, sharp. Aggressive Eli countered instantly, knight to f6. The sound of the piece clicking into place felt final. Like a door shutting, Calvin's laughter faltered. He studied the board longer than before, his confident rhythm broken. His diamond watch caught the light as he tapped the table once, twice trying to mask hesitation. Across from him, Eli simply waited, calm, unbothered, eyes steady. The murmurs grew again, this time with curiosity instead of mockery. The crowd could feel it. Something had shifted. Calvin leaned back, forcing another smile. But his fingers drummed the table faster now. For the first time that night, the great Calvin Kane looked unsure. "Who taught you that defense?" Calvin's voice wavered just enough for the crowd to hear it. Eli didn't answer right away. His hand hovered over the board, fingers steady, eyes scanning the pieces as if the whole room had vanished. The chandeliers, the murmuring guests, the clinking glasses, everything faded to silence. Then, a memory slipped in like a shadow. He was 15 again. A small chess hall filled with plastic chairs and flickering lights. His mother sitting in the front row, wrapped in a hospital blanket, smiling proudly each time he made a move. Pawn to e5, young Eli had said then, his voice trembling but certain. Cheers had erupted. The tournament director handed him a gold medal. "National Youth Champion," the announcer called out. His mother had clapped the loudest, tears shining in her tired eyes. He'd promised her that night he'd go pro. That one day he'd make her proud enough to forget the sickness eating away at her body. But sickness doesn't wait for dreams. Weeks later, hospital bills piled high, and Eli traded his chessboard for a wrench. The medals went into a shoebox beneath his bed, where they gathered dust beside unpaid bills and a faded photo of his mom smiling with the trophy in her lap. He blinked. The memory dissolved. He was back in the gala, back at the board, staring at Calvin Kane's smirk. Eli's hand moved again, bishop gliding smoothly across the board to intercept Calvin's attack. The move was quiet, perfect, surgical. Dr. Marin Holt leaned forward. Her eyes narrowed as recognition sparked. She whispered to herself, "That's the Moran Gambit." From the 2008 Nationals. Calvin frowned, confused by the sudden shift in her expression. "What's wrong, doctor?" "Don't tell me our mechanic's impressing you." Her reply was calm, but cutting. "You'd do well to pay attention, Calvin. He's not playing like an amateur." The crowd began to murmur again. People moved closer, drawn by the invisible tension now hanging in the air. Calvin shoved another piece forward, louder than necessary. "Knight to c6, he snapped, knocking a pawn over by accident. The small clatter echoed too loudly. Eli looked up, meeting Calvin's eyes for the first time since the game began. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire ballroom. "Careful," he said. "You're rushing." A few guests chuckled under their breath, not at Eli, but at Calvin. The millionaire's jaw tightened. "Lucky guess," he said, forcing a grin. "Don't get cocky." Eli placed his piece gently on the board. "No," he said softly. "Just experience. Something shifted. It wasn't just about the game anymore." Calvin's arrogance had cracks now, small, visible ones. His laughter came forced, his movements sharp, impatient. Eli stayed composed, his every move measured, patient, deliberate. Each piece Calvin threw forward was countered with precision. Each attempt to overwhelm was quietly dismantled. The guests leaned closer, wine glasses forgotten. The laughter that had once filled the hall was replaced with silence, the kind of silence that comes when pride starts to crumble. Dr. Holt watched every move, her curiosity sharpening into intrigue. She turned to her assistant, a young man with a tablet. "Check the records," she whispered. He blinked. "Records of what, ma'am?" "Past junior champions. 10 years ago. Maybe 15. Search the name Moran." Her voice was steady, but her eyes never left the man in the old jacket, the mechanic who moved his pieces like a master remembering an old song. Calvin made another move, reckless and loud, his diamond cufflink flashing as his hand slammed the table. "Your turn," he said sharply. Eli didn't look rattled. His fingers traced the top of a pawn, then slid forward with calm certainty. Another trap. Another perfect counter. The crowd exhaled collectively, like they'd been holding their breath. Calvin stared at the board, trying to make sense of it. But the rhythm of the game had shifted completely. No longer his show, no longer his control. And for the first time that night, the king of the room realized he was being quietly cornered. "He's setting a trap," Dr. Holt murmured under her breath. "And Calvin doesn't see it." The words barely left her lips before Calvin slammed his hand down on the board, sending his bishop gliding across the polished squares. "There!" he announced loudly, his voice sharp enough to slice through the chatter. That's how a real player takes control. A murmur of approval rippled through the onlookers, mostly guests eager to stay on the millionaire's good side. Cameras flashed. Glasses clinked. Calvin leaned back, his grin wide and triumphant, but Eli didn't flinch. He simply studied the board, eyes tracing the patterns like he was reading a familiar map. His hand moved slowly, knight forward, smooth and deliberate. The small piece landed with a soft click. The room stilled. Calvin frowned, leaning closer. It took him a second to realize what had just happened. His queen, the most powerful piece on the board, had been cornered. Eli's knight sat poised like a predator ready to strike, while his pawns quietly locked down every escape route. A few gasps broke out in the crowd. Someone whispered, "He's trapped her." Calvin's confident smirk faltered for the first time that night. He looked from the board to Eli, then back again, searching for a way out that wasn't there. Up on the staircase, the twins, now cleaned up and dressed in matching silver dresses, leaned against the railing, watching with wide, gleaming eyes. "Daddy's losing," one of them whispered. "Half in awe, half in disbelief." "Shh," the other giggled. "Don't tell him yet." The guests edged closer, drawn by the strange tension between silence and spectacle. Even the music in the background seemed to fade away, leaving only the faint sound of breathing. Calvin's, heavy and impatient, and Eli's, slow and even. Calvin straightened, forcing a laugh. "Not bad," he said. "You got lucky." He slid his queen out of danger, sacrificing another piece to do it. "But let's see how long that luck lasts." Dr. Holt's gaze didn't waver. "Luck has nothing to do with it," she said softly. Eli made another move, simple, efficient, cutting away another path Calvin thought was safe. The guests began to murmur again. Some nodded quietly, others looked around, uneasy. The mood that had once been full of laughter now felt heavier, almost reverent. Calvin's jaw tightened. He took a long sip of champagne, though his hand trembled slightly as he set the glass down. "You really think you can beat me, huh? Some guy from a garage?" Eli didn't answer. He just placed his next piece, rook to d8, and leaned back, calm as ever. His silence was louder than any comeback could have been. Calvin's face flushed. "Fine," he snapped. "Let's see how you handle this." He launched an all-out assault, pieces flying across the board. A flashy combination meant to impress. Pawns surged forward like soldiers on parade. His queen slicing through the center as the crowd gasped at the speed. For a moment, it looked spectacular, like he'd turned the tables. But Eli's eyes never left the board. Every move Calvin made was anticipated, absorbed, redirected. His hands moved slowly, almost tenderly, rearranging his defense one piece at a time, a calm tide against a raging storm. When Calvin tried to press harder, Eli countered with a single devastating move, a pawn sliding forward like the quiet step of fate. The room fell into stunned silence again. Dr. Holt whispered, almost to herself, "He's toying with him. Every move has a purpose." Calvin wiped at his forehead. A bead of sweat slipped down to his temple. His laughter came forced now, brittle. "Not bad, not bad. But let's make this interesting." He lunged forward, sacrificing his bishop dramatically, the piece clattering against the board. "Your turn, mechanic." The crowd gasped at the boldness. Cameras clicked. Eli looked down for a long moment. His hand hovered over the pieces. Then slowly, he reached for his queen. He moved her, straight into the line of danger. The audience audibly gasped. Someone whispered, He's blundered. He's giving it away. Even Dr. Holt leaned forward, frowning slightly. What is he doing? Calvin's eyes lit up, greedy and sure. Finally, he said, grinning like a man reborn. Finally, you make a mistake. He reached for his next move with a gleam of triumph, unaware that, just beneath the surface of the board, the trap was already closing. And across from him, Eli sat completely still, expression unreadable, hands folded, watching quietly as the tide began to turn. That move. It's over. The words came from Dr. Holt, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the murmur of the crowd. Heads turned toward her, then back to the board, where Eli's queen sat exposed, seemingly doomed. Calvin grinned wide, his confidence roaring back. Finally, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Even good deeds have their limits, Mr. Mechanic. He reached forward, seizing Eli's queen with theatrical flair. And that, he declared, is how you end a fantasy. The crowd laughed, relieved, almost grateful to have the familiar order restored. Cameras flashed. Champagne glasses lifted. For a moment, Calvin Kane was once again the unshakable millionaire, basking in his own applause. But Eli didn't move. Didn't blink. He just looked down at the board, expression unreadable. Then, with slow precision, he reached for his knight. Click. The piece landed on F7, a subtle sound, just wood touching wood. But it silenced the room instantly. Calvin blinked. What? Eli spoke quietly, his voice calm and low. Knight to F7. He leaned back. Checkmate. It took a second, one long, stretching heartbeat, for Calvin to understand. Then his face changed. The proud grin cracked first, then faded completely as his eyes darted across the board. His king, entrapped, pawns blocking every path. Queen gone! His once powerful army now cornered, helpless against a move that had been unfolding all along. The silence was deafening. A glass slipped from someone's hand, shattering softly against the marble floor. The scent of spilled champagne mixed with the tension hanging in the air. Calvin's lips parted. No, that's not possible. Dr. Holt rose from her chair. Her tone carried the weight of absolute certainty. It's possible, she said, because this man... She paused, turning to the stunned crowd. This man is no mechanic. All eyes swung toward her. He's Eli Moran, she continued. Former national chess prodigy. Junior champion of the 2008 circuit. The name hit the room like thunder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones were lifted. Someone whispered, Eli Moran. That Eli Moran? Calvin froze, color draining from his face. His mouth opened. No words came out. The guests who'd laughed before now stood speechless, eyes flicking between him and the quiet man across the table. Eli didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply folded his hands, waiting for the chaos to settle. From the staircase, two small voices broke the silence. Uncle Eli, the twins, Calvin's daughters, darted down the steps, their dresses catching the light as they ran. They wrapped their arms around him without hesitation, faces glowing with joy. Calvin stood motionless, watching as his own children clung to the man he'd just tried to humiliate. Dr. Holt gave a small, knowing smile. Seems they remember kindness better than pride, she said softly. The room erupted, not with laughter, but applause. Real, thunderous applause that echoed through the marble halls. Some guests even cheered, while others simply nodded in silent respect. Reporters scrambled for angles. Cameras zoomed in on the board, the perfect ending frozen in checkmate. Calvin's hands shook. His breath came shallow. You knew who I was? He finally managed to say. Eli looked up, his tone gentle but firm. No, I just knew what kind of man I wanted to be. That single line struck deeper than any victory could. Calvin sank slightly in his seat, eyes cast down. Around him, the noise grew louder. Applause, murmurs, the faint sound of the twins' laughter. Eli stood, adjusting his old jacket, the same one he'd worn into the mansion. The crowd parted for him without being asked, as though instinctively recognizing who truly deserved the spotlight. Calvin tried to speak again, maybe to apologize, maybe to recover some dignity, but the words wouldn't come. He was left there, motionless, surrounded by cameras, the board between them like evidence of his own undoing. Eli paused at the doorway, the twins still holding his hands, and looked back once, not in pride, not in anger, but in quiet understanding. behind him. The king of the gala sat in silence, checkmated in every sense of the word. "Mr. Kane, I believe you owe this man an apology." Dr. Holt's voice rang through the ballroom, calm but commanding, the kind of tone that silenced even the loudest egos. Every head turned toward her. The applause faded. All that remained was the soft hum of tension in the air. Calvin Kane froze. His diamond cufflinks glinted under the chandeliers as his hand twitched slightly on the edge of the chess table. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Dr. Holt stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "While many of you were laughing," she said evenly, "this man, Eli Moran, was giving shelter to two frightened children, without knowing who they were or who their father was." The room stayed silent. Even the waiters paused mid-step. "He asked for no reward," she continued, her gaze sweeping across the guests. "He didn't post photos. He didn't call the press. He simply gave them food, safety, and kindness, something money can't buy." A few people lowered their heads, embarrassed. Others looked away, suddenly fascinated by their champagne glasses. Dr. Holt's voice softened, but it carried weight. "Eli Moran once had a future brighter than most of us here. A national chess prodigy, until life demanded he choose between his dreams and his mother's health. He chose family. That's not failure. That's strength." The crowd stirred, admiration now replacing mockery. Calvin swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the board between them. The same board that had just dismantled his pride piece by piece. He looked up at Eli, at the man who had beaten him not just in a game but in grace. He began, voice cracking slightly. "I misjudged you." Eli looked at him quietly, his face calm, almost kind. "We all misjudge sometimes," he said. Those words, spoken without bitterness, hit harder than any insult could have. Calvin's shoulders slumped. The fight in him, the arrogance, the need to win, was gone. Dr. Holt turned back to the crowd. "And because real talent deserves a second chance," she said, "I'll be sponsoring Eli's return to the national chess circuit. He deserves to be back where he belongs." Gasps and applause rippled through the room. Cameras flashed again, but this time not for the millionaire. For the man who'd just reminded them what true dignity looked like. "And one more thing," Dr. Holt added, smiling faintly. "I'll also be funding a scholarship program for gifted children from low-income families. We'll call it the Moran Initiative. No more prodigies should have to trade genius for survival." The applause grew louder, genuine, heartfelt, thundering through the hall. Some guests even rose from their seats. Eli stood quietly amid the noise, looking slightly overwhelmed. He wasn't used to the spotlight, not anymore. His hands rested at his sides, steady and unshaken. Calvin extended his hand awkwardly. "I hope we can start over," he managed to say. Eli nodded, shaking it once. "Just start by being the kind of man your daughters can look up to," he replied gently. Calvin blinked, the words sinking deep. "I will," he whispered. The crowd broke into applause again, but this time, it wasn't the applause of spectacle or wealth. It was respect. Eli gave a small bow of thanks and quietly stepped away from the board. The twins rushed up to him again, giggling through their tears, wrapping their arms around his waist. "You're amazing, Uncle Eli," one of them said. He smiled and ruffled their hair. "Nah," he murmured. "I just played my turn." Dr. Holt placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder as he walked toward the exit. "The world remembers stories like yours," she said. "Don't disappear again." Outside, the night was cool and quiet, a stark contrast to the golden chaos inside. Eli took a deep breath, looking up at the stars. The air smelled like rain and new beginnings. Behind him, the mansion windows glowed with light. The twins waved from one of them, faces bright, hands pressed to the glass. Eli smiled, giving a small wave back before walking into the night. In his mind, the game replayed one last time, not the checkmate, but the moments before it, the laughter, the challenge, the choice to stay calm when the world mocked him. He exhaled softly, almost to himself. Some moves aren't played on a board, he thought. They're played in the heart.